Okay, I think we're live now. So we started 5 minutes late, so Patrick and Chris are probably flipping out right now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, gotta have that order.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the thing.
It
So,
is.
yeah, so we're doing this tonight, right? I mean, we're here.
We're here. We might as well.
Yeah, I might as well do it. Got this whole broadcast going, so why not?
Why not?
Funny story, Matt actually did turn it off and on again, so.
What?
So I said that, well, Patrick in the Lucy Couple channel said that,
Oh,
you
tell
know,
him to turn it off and turn it back on again.
yeah. So now he's telling you to go ahead and try it again. So
Oh, okay.
yeah,
I
your
did.
name's
Yeah, I
like
did actually.
Seafoam Green now, right?
I don't care, dude.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, do
It's
whatever you want.
like it's like a Miami. I got a little Miami Vice thing going.
Okay, well we'll go with that. That's fine.
You're not gonna get me to spit it out.
One of these times, I'm gonna get you to spit your water all over your computer. It's gonna be hilarious. All right, so you ready to do this thing? Are you prepared?
Ready as I'll ever be. I think.
Okay. All
Can't
right.
imagine being able to be more ready.
All right. You sound prepared.
That's what I meant. Prepared. That's the word.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I got you. Yeah, I got you.
All right. I'm gonna count us down. Three, two, one.
Why are you gonna count? We're already past that part.
Aren't we gonna clap?
We're like legitimately broadcasting right now.
Oh shit. All right.
We are on top of our game tonight.
I'm gonna try really hard not to cuss a lot.
Okay, this is gonna be an explicitly tagged podcast. Fantastic.
Okay,
All right.
we're good.
Okay, cool. Welcome to the Loosely Couple Podcast, episode 18. Tonight we're talking about getting a team on with best practices, or my practices are better than yours, or something like that. I don't know exactly what we're talking about, but maybe Matt does. I am your co-host Jeff, and this is Matt. Matt, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing well, and yeah, we are. We're gonna talk about practice, not the game. Practice. Yeah, no, we got. I'm pretty excited about kind of what we got going on tonight. This is one of my more favorite topics, like agile.
Oh yeah,
So I'll probably get kind of ranty again.
we all know how much you love Agile. You bring it up almost
I
every
do.
episode.
I do. I hold it here.
And if
Um,
you don't, I will. So there's that.
yeah, yeah. It's gonna happen either way. Uh, so I'm gonna just awkwardly transition this to our sponsor, Code Rabbi, who is currently on his Wisdom as a Service tour. If you what's it? Is it wisdomasaservice.com?
WisdomWorldTour.com.
Wisdomworldtour.com. Visit wisdomworldtour.com. You can find out where Code Rabbi is today, tomorrow, the next couple of days. If you're in the area, maybe go stop by and check him out. If not, just root for him and send him tweets and stuff. He likes that.
He does, yeah.
And I think that's a
You
pretty
could
good
you
spot.
could find him at Code Rabbi
Yeah,
on
Code Rabbi
Twitter.
on Twitter.
Tweet him.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
Yeah,
Tweet at him.
yeah.
Okay. Nailed it.
Nailed it. It's gonna be one of those nights, I can tell. Yeah. So Code Rabbi's he actually kicked off his thing. I think a couple days ago he
The
left.
other
So
day, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so it's pretty cool. So he's actually doing this whole Wisdom as a Service tour. So if you get a chance to check it out, you should definitely do that. All right. So best practices. I mean, besides Agile, what?
We're not gonna consider if we can talk around components of it, but we're not gonna talk about agile as being a best practice because nobody in the world even knows how to do it.
Hey, I am just trolling you, man. I'm just trolling you.
Oh,
Relax.
this not tonight, Jeff.
Not tonight. Okay, so we're talking about best practices. So
We are.
what do you? I mean, I think so. But what do you think defines like what is a best practice? How do you decide something is a best practice?
That's a good question. Because I think about a lot of the things that I consider to be best practices. I think like if you're a company or an organization that's making money from software, from developing software, whatever, um, a best practice would be replacing an existing practice with something that saves you more time or money, so it would be focused around managing the company more efficiently, more effectively,
Okay, I
right?
can see
So
that.
if there's no tests, right, you're going to write tests because you're paying it forward, so in the future you don't have this, humongous waste of time.
Yeah, I can see that.
So I mean that's because they change and people will have different opinions on them and all that kind of stuff. You know, I don't know. I would almost even make a case tonight that we talk about because like you go from like really terrible stuff to best practices. I think we should talk some tonight about like making progress towards those, so it's not
That's a
such a
good
big
idea.
jump. You know.
Yeah, I mean it's like it's the whole cold turkey or I'm gonna change immediately or I'm gonna take this problem and then oh I heard that it's a good idea if we do this so I'm going to do that now from now on I'm always going to do that that's the way I'm going to do things it really doesn't
Right.
work.
Right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I would agree
What?
with
Yeah.
that.
So what would you? How would you define or describe a best practice?
I think yeah for me I think best practices are kind of tools or techniques or um, practices, uh, just things that have been defined over time to be useful in helping success of a project. So these can be it can range from processes to specifics of how you write your code or where you write your code or that type of thing. So for me they're things that are they're ideas and things that you can actually do or use to help you be more successful. So,
Okay.
these range from everything from, use source control of some sort to, you know, everything down to use a coding standard, like just, basics to more complex things. And I think to me, it seems like I take the definition more from, life or, from outside of programming itself. But,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, so, best practice in cooking I guess would be something that you learn is don't put the handles to pots on the edge of the stove like off so that as you're walking by you knock it down like it's something that you learn like you learn how to work more efficiently so you're not having this problem all the time or you learn you know well I guess not to mix meats and vegetables on cutting boards like you learn all these little things they're just things that people have learned over time and they've decided this is how you should do things as opposed to this other way
Right.
which could work but it's probably going to cause you more issues than it's worth.
Right. Like you can cut the vegetables on the same cutting board that you slice the raw chicken on, but you'll probably die.
Yeah, I mean there's a possibility you'll die. You could be fine like
You're
you
you're
that's something
increasing the probability that you'll die.
sure. Or we can take the classical definition that Chris is giving us which is best practices I know better than you so do it my way it's better like that's what it boils down to
I
right
mean sounds
the way
about
I
right.
do things is the best therefore
Well, I
that's the
mean,
best
but
practice.
yeah, if by saying I mean me, then yeah, you're right on. All
Of
right.
course, that's what I mean.
It's gonna be one of those nights, Jeff.
I could tell. So, um, I wanted to think back, like what was a time for you that you've been somewhere and you've been like, man, this really sucks. We should use, something I learned about, and you had a difficult time convincing people, hey, we should do this.
So you just want one time?
Your best.
Or do you want all my times? There was a job that I was at before I moved out here that didn't use version control at all. At all. And we got there. And when I say it all, I mean like some, not some, at least out of the projects I was on, not some, not a little bit, not even badly, just was not there. And so yeah, so obviously we broached that subject. Hey, let's do this. And it was kind of left in my hands like, well, if you get everybody excited about doing this, then it'll stick and it'll be fine. Oh, okay. I mean, you can't just say like you have to do this. All right, fine, I'll work it out. And nobody on the team knew Git at all, or SVN. They didn't know it was like index.php, whack, or however many exclamation points are at the back is what version it is, and all that stuff. So yeah, so it didn't work out well.
Yeah.
And there were numerous examples of that same job. Everything from testing to QA to automating stuff. Yeah, I could probably fill up a whole episode just with stories, and they would be hilarious. But you don't want to hear me talk all night.
Yeah, no, I think we're done hearing you talk for the rest of the night. So thank you very much for being on the show.
All right, I'll catch you guys next time.
Yeah, I think I had a similar experience. I worked at a place where we were all working on a development server, and what that meant was there was a box sitting in a closet somewhere, and it was mapped as a network drive on everybody's computer.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody worked on the code on that, and of course, nothing ever went wrong. It was perfect. Yeah, and
I can't see how it would.
Yeah, I don't know, and it was very resistant. People were very resistant to changing that because they were like, well, this is kind of working. We only have issues every once in a while because for the most part, people were working in different areas of the application, or the applications or websites, whatever you want to call them.
The weblications.
The weblications. So it wasn't that big of a deal, but there were definitely times when people stepped on each other's toes, and it was like,
mm-hmm.
I tried to use those as, hey, we should learn source control, and at the time I was like, we should learn Subversion because that's what I was exposed to, so we should use that. And it was often it was fought because it was like, well, we don't want to do that because we like just having the simplicity of this. Like Subversion seems like an extra step, so we want this.
I save it and it's up.
Yeah, I save it and then it's on our development server and I don't have to worry about it. And it's like, yeah, that's true, but it's
until you screw something up.
Yeah, there are definitely advantages in other places. And I tried to show an example because we also had designers at the time, and they were very adverse to trying this whole source control thing out.
Right.
It was funny to me because they had history inside their documents. Like they had Photoshop files, and they had layers that represented revisions of things, and they had history where they could go and so I'm trying to show them this is the benefits. Like this is what you get. Like you have the ability to go back and look at what changed and stuff like that. But I never really won that argument, and I left, and not because of that specifically, but I ended up leaving, and then later they got on Subversion and were like, this is awesome. And I'm like, well, too little too late, guys.
Later, guys.
Yeah. But I think it's like that with a lot of things. It's you have someone who's there and they're saying we should do this, and it's everyone else is like, oh, it resists change. I don't want to do that. That's crazy talk. What's wrong with what I'm doing right now? And then later something happens and they figure out, oh,
that's why
that person wasn't just blowing smoke. There was actually a reason for this, and I think that's true of a lot of things, and
Right.
it seems like you'll find that a lot. So my advice: if you ever find yourself, if someone's talking to you and they're telling you should do this, and you think that's really dumb, what I'm doing right now is
I think
fine.
that all the time.
Maybe take a step back and think about why that person, or try to figure out why that person is telling you to do something. Maybe
Yeah.
they are full of it, but maybe they're not.
Yeah. Well, so it seems like a good uh, point to like move. I don't know what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is, I'm gonna ask a different question. When you were going through your thing, trying to get SVN implemented, or we're talking about trying to evangelize it and get people excited about it. What kind of support or lack of support did you get from people above you, and did they even know? Like,
Um,
obviously your manager would know, but I'm thinking people more like farther up the chain.
yeah, there were a couple. Like I can think of a couple times, and I can't think of a time when I had a lot of buy-in from above, my immediate supervisor.
Right.
And I don't know how much of that was just because, at the time I wasn't playing to that level, like
Right. Right. Right.
I
Right.
realized that that was the way the world worked a lot of times, but I don't know. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that was one of the things I thought of. Because like when we had started a lot of this stuff, right? I was a senior. There was another guy there who was a senior, and I would come up with these ideas all the time. Like let's move into unit testing. Well, it's going to slow us down. Well, I worked on the same. I had the same exact user story, whatever the hell it's called. Um, 3 sprints in a row because the bug kept coming back up because we don't have tests. And that was the one thing that really disappointed me was that management wasn't like, oh wait, you did the same bug popped up 3 releases in a row, and you say we can fix that. We don't have angry clients. Like no, they're like, well, don't waste time. Like they assumed because I'm like a programmer and I have a creative mind and like exploring and learning new things, that I'm just like, yeah, let's do testing, and I'm just gonna like, jerk around all day on the web. Like,
Wait, is that not what you do?
anyway, well, I no, YouTube is different. YouTube is not jerking around on the
Oh
web.
yeah. Okay. All right. You got me.
I don't even look at it. It's just for audio. Um,
Just for background noise.
it's just background noise is all it
Yeah.
is. What was I saying?
Well, we were talking about like buy-in from management.
Oh, right. Yeah, so they treated it like I was trying, which was really weird to me because I'm like, you're the ones that are getting the phone calls and getting yelled at.
Yeah.
If anybody should care about this, it's you. And they always treated it with like a level of suspicion, like I was crafty enough to like come up with some sort of time stealing method by talking about unit testing.
Well, you're obviously trying to steal time because basically look at it like this: you want to write
No.
tests, which is probably going to take you a little longer than just normally writing code. So you are trying
Yes.
to double or triple the amount of time that you spend on each given task, thereby
Right.
doing less actual work, even though you've
It's
done
not,
more
but
work.
it's not less actual work. It's the same amount of actual work.
No,
Just
the
delivered
work,
less.
the tests are not work
They really
as far as the
are.
company is concerned.
Oh. Well, they should.
You have to. This is manager, man. You have to
I
think
don't have
like
to
a
do anything.
manager.
This is America.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm just saying, if you were a manager and you were in a position where you were questioning someone's motives for testing, you would
Right.
definitely
But
not see tests as valid work or
but
valuable.
I mean, think what repeat what you just said. Trying
No,
to
I don't
waste
have to.
time
This is
for it.
America.
Touche.
Yeah.
Um, You said if the manager is going to complain about right, that just seems like I don't know. I was disappointed. Like to me, that seems like an obvious thing. Like yes, we want to know our software works.
Yeah, and it is. I think a lot of places it is. So something that I've found with testing in particular is you. So the big thing that people tell you to sell is, oh look, it's going to catch all these bugs, and I think that's kind of a misnomer because you end up doing people a disservice going forward by
Right.
selling the fact that writing unit tests is going to magically catch all these bugs. I mean, it is going to prevent some bugs, but it's not a bug
Right.
catcher, right?
Right.
That's not the point. So you do every other developer in the future a disservice by selling it to the manager that you want to do this because it's going to catch a lot of bugs. All that's going to happen is bugs that you would have written because you didn't understand the problem very well wouldn't show up, but that's not going to decrease anything as far as the bean counter manager who's worried about that is going to be concerned. So I always try to take it a step further and say I'm already doing this. When I was selling testing to a manager at a different place or at a
Mm-hmm.
previous job, I always said I'm already doing this work. I'm just not doing it in automated repeatable format. So a lot of times when I was working on something, I would write little test harnesses, which were little temporary things that would execute the code in a certain way and give me output on the screen. And then once I was done, I would throw those away. Like, this isn't really. I mean, it's not as robust as a unit test suite, but it was at least something that was, showing me, hey, this is how the code actually behaves. And so I was telling them, I'm doing this already, and then couple that with the fact that I'm spending, hours
Right.
clicking around in my browser as testing, as QA, or somebody spending hours clicking around to QA. And I'm like, why can't we just spend that same amount of time writing tests that I can run over and over and over and over and over again into the future and will show me that this code still works as it's supposed to? And so
Just
just like, explaining it in that way really worked for that particular manager because it was
right.
like, this is time I'm already spending. So I'm not costing you anything, but I am giving you an opportunity to be able to more closely understand what's going on, or at least have the ability to look at and see the progress of it by looking at the suites at the tests running, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, every manager and every organization and stuff is going to be different. Certainly. I mean, your approach sounds like it would be effective to at least warrant consideration most places.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, of course it is. It's the best practice.
all right, you're talking about practice. Should I point out though, so before we move on from that, because I had another question and I was curious if you ever dealt with this, but I do have to point out. So I was doing my Allen Iverson impression in the pre-show because talking about practice, and this hat that I have on now is the same logo that he wore in that interview on that day. And I think that's neat because we're here and we're talking about practice, not the game.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question I wanted to ask you now, back
So
to
to be clear, Allen Iverson is not sponsoring the podcast. That's
no, Allen,
Rabbi
no,
sponsoring, not
yeah,
Allen Iverson.
Code
Just
Rabbi, not
all
the
clear.
answer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I
Okay,
mean, he has the answers, but whatever. Yeah.
all right, you're trying too hard. The hook just came out. So have you ever been vultured?
I'm not
Do you
going
know
to
what
talk
I
about that on the show, man.
do you know what I mean by that?
I don't know what you mean by that.
All right, so this is what I consider being vultured, right? When a man and a woman love each other. No. Terrible joke, I'm sorry.
You should
Being
be.
vultured is when you come. I know. Told you it was going to be one of those kind of nights. when you come up with an idea for something that you want to implement, that's a best practice type thing, whether it be a coding standard, testing, source control, whatever, right? And you have a manager that you pitch it to, right? And you know enough about this where you can kind of get everybody up to speed and going, and then your manager approves it, and then takes over the whole entire thing. So your idea gets vultured because you're like, I can do this and I can run this, and it's not going to get vultured, and then vulture.
I I don't know that I've ever been vultured in that respect.
Okay. Let's keep it there. Let's keep it in software.
Yeah. Well, I was planning on it, but I mean, there have been times when I've pushed for something and then it didn't get or it didn't take off like I wanted it to or whatever, and then weeks later or whatever, a manager or someone else who I talk to about it comes in and is like, I've got this brilliant idea, and then like, oh, that's a great idea, but to me, I don't really care that much about it. Usually, I am more interested that the practice is being
Vulture.
taken in, or is being practiced, because that usually makes my life better.
Right.
So I don't worry too much about that, but I can't think of any specific time when that has happened to me personally.
Okay.
Have you been vultured, Matt?
I have been. I have been vultured.
I mean, you came up with a name for it, so.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was pretty. I thought you were going to know exactly what I was talking about when I said it. I don't know what kind of circles.
Do a good imitation of a vulture. That's what the channel is telling us.
Oh, okay. Well, good. I don't know that I've ever actually heard one, but that's flying bird of prey is what I was going for. Okay. I have been vultured, and my experience with being vultured, right, is that the person who takes over your idea essentially like runs it into the ground like immediately, and it becomes terrible, and then they have the authority over the team to make everyone do that terrible thing that's not right and is screwing everything up even more.
Yeah.
So I was just curious if I was alone in that, or if you had maybe been vultured and had something not go super well, after it had been.
So then at that point, does the vulturer say, well, this is Matt's idea?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the typical vulture move right there. They
total vulture move.
Right. Like, Johnson, why did this fail? Sir, it was Frost's idea, and he didn't implement it very well. And then that's when, that's...
I could see that being a thing. So I guess you're saying that we should look out for being vultured as we
look out for being vultured. It's usually most of the vultures fly around the really big, like, political, super big hierarchy. Like the VP of VPs. And you get that.
That's my life ambition.
That is, I know you're a bigwig already though. Kids, learn Ruby. You can get to the top.
Yeah, do that. It's the path to the top, I'm telling you.
I don't know. That's my experience has been the vultures hang around the really big political companies, and everyone's fighting for promotions and fighting for scraps at the lunch table and stuff. So yeah, beware of vultures because they'll take your idea and they'll steal it and they'll rub it in your face when they give you credit back after it's blown up.
Okay, so vulturism is not a best practice. We'll stick to that.
All right, I can live with that.
Okay, cool. So a practice that that I think is a good one to get involved in or to try to push for is code reviews. Like, if you're not reviewing code on your team, and if you're a team of one, code reviews are a little awkward.
I did a
Talking
great job
yourself in
here. This is exactly how I would have done it.
You're a genius, man. But if you're not reviewing code in your team, you should do that. Like, you should do it tomorrow. Like, it's a very useful thing to help with. Like, how many times have you, if you don't have some sort of formal process around reviewing code, how many times have you looked at something and been like, oh, this is problematic, I need to fix this, or oh, who wrote this? This is not a good idea because of something that that person may not have known. Like, it happens all the time. So this is where I think code reviews come into play. Is they help you to they're a best practice. They're kind of a meta best practice, but they help you to enforce other best practices, like
Right.
having code reviews and having automation around code reviews or CI and that type of stuff, that type of tooling, I should say, helps you to be able to do things like checking on, if you've got some sort of rule around commenting or naming schemes, or how you organize code, or if you've got or if you've got like coding standards that you follow, like you follow certain PSRs or whatever for your particular language. Code reviews and CI, like, I kind of group them all together, but they help you to enforce those and to really say, hey, this is an area where this would help. So even if you don't have all the automation going up front, just the code review side of things is a great communication tool to help you with furthering other best practice ideas that you want to bring in.
Yeah. No, I think code reviews are extremely useful. I think especially when you get I think they're really helpful in getting people acclimated to the team, onboarding.
Yeah.
Once somebody kind of gets up to where they can do stuff, there's always going to be somebody, especially if you're working on a large, maybe on the older side application. There's, the people that have been there the longest are going to know where all the bodies are hidden, in the code. So when you change one thing and something completely different happens, there's a reason, and the guy with the neck beard knows, and you have to buy him donuts so that he'll tell you.
Yeah, tribal knowledge is always fun.
Tribal knowledge, exactly. I think I like when I get my code reviewed by somebody that's kind of at the same level as me, right? Because we both kind of learn through it. And we both kind of learn through, and even as somebody that's higher than you, as far as I don't know, skill or whatever, or somebody that has less skill and less experience, like, no matter where you are, you can always pick something up from talking about somebody else's code.
Yeah, that's definitely
I think
true.
it's a good knowledge thing, and yeah, obviously the quality control aspect of it, helps a bit too, because that's your first line of defense for, anything you can catch there is just gravy, because it didn't take you, a test or a whole lot of time.
Of course, it depends on your team standards on how you review and how often you commit and such. But yes, generally, code review is the quickest way for that type of stuff. Yeah. So speaking of some of these things that you catch in code reviews, I think one of the trickiest best practices is around naming, or how do you name things? Of course, this is a classic problem, but I think having conventions is a good idea. Like, I think just assuming that you can write in a doc somewhere that says things should be named appropriately and meaningfully, or they should have meaning. It's that's not really helpful. Like, I think having examples of, what is acceptable, like having standards around what does your team expect in terms of, how you're going to name things, like where you're going to put things, that type of stuff, I think is important.
Mm-hmm.
Because, what you were talking about, like onboarding and, bringing someone new in, they can pick this up over time through code reviews, but for me anyway, there's nothing worse than starting on a project, sending in a pull request, and then being beaten down because I didn't follow some convention. Like I didn't,
Style guide.
I didn't order something correctly, or I used abbreviations where I can't use abbreviations. Like all these little things that are part of style guides.
Right.
If they're not documented somewhere, it's very difficult. And if I'm in a project, especially if it's not my employment, if it's some
Right.
project I'm volunteering on, and my first 3 pull requests are all just filled with, oh my gosh, you broke our conventions, then I'm not going to be inclined to continue working on it. That's just, I'm
Right.
just going to
Right.
be like, yeah,
You
this
fix
isn't
it.
fun for me. Yeah. Yeah.
You don't like my conventions? You fix it.
You do it. Yeah. So I think a best practice for, team organization would be to have things documented. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think this is something that everyone struggles with. I'm probably the worst offender in the world at not having things documented, but it is a sign of a polished, seasoned developer to be able to uh, have the documentation available that helps people contribute or helps people understand things better. Like
Okay.
I think that's a practice that you should work
Mm-hmm.
on, is how much documentation is right for different projects that you're working on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is a balance because I've been in situations where I'm like, I'm gonna literally write down everything.
Yeah.
Basically to take the code and translate every line of it into actual English and write it out, and you have these really big, 900-page manuals for everyone to peruse at their leisure. Um, and there's been times where I'm like, yeah, I'm just not gonna write any sort of documentation for this whatsoever because I'm in a hurry and it has to get done, and that's pretty much it. But these days, like when I do open source stuff now, I don't know if you saw my Weedle README.
I
It's
think I
very
did.
it's very nice. Very nice. Um, I put a significant amount of time into it, but not a crazy amount. And so for me, like that was kind of the first thing, like open source thing anyway, that I've done that I've like went into the project with the idea of documentation and code being equally important.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
could see that.
again, the proper level of documentation, not to say documentate. The more documentation you have, the better. Sometimes that's the case, sometimes that's not. But you know, for me,
I
it
would
was
say it's usually the case because most of the time projects have zero documentation, so more documentation than zero is,
right,
is always better.
right. That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, yeah. You guys probably don't document stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I don't think anyone actually documents anything.
Don't people like pay writers to come in and do it?
Yeah, tech writers. Yeah,
Tech
always.
writers. Yeah.
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 Yeah, you should
You could,
definitely go
or
that route.
you could do that. You could do that. You know.
Okay, so what are some practices that you've struggled with like over time? Like what is something that you know you should do, but you're like, oh man, I don't want to do that.
Um. Mine. So I like to stay up on the things. I moved to Vagrant pretty fast after it came out, and got into testing and TDD and test first and all that kind of stuff. Um, like those types of things. Like I'm generally really excited by that type of stuff. Like, oh, cool, something new that's gonna help make my job a little easier or whatever. Um, the thing that I struggle the most with is coding standards and not using Code Sniffer. like so my very and I've told this story before I think, but my very first open source pull request was to Pyro CMS, which at the time was run by uh, Phil Sturgeon, and so I sent him this really janky ass looking pull request. Like I don't know, like the braces were all over the place, and like it worked, but I sent that, and I always had this impression of Phil that he was like really super mean. Um, and he told me like, yeah, I'm not merging that. Fix it. Make it look like the rest of the code. Here's a link to the style guide. Like he gave me everything I needed to know to fix it. But even to this day, like I do kind of what I like to do, and then I'll go back and try to find automated ways to fix it. Like I'm a
Yeah.
spaces guy, and some of this, like we have some stuff like the JavaScript where we use tabs, and so I'll just make it like in Sublime I can make a tab be a tab or a tab be four spaces. So I can kind of play with it, so I don't really have to,
Did you
remember.
just say in Sublime?
I did.
I don't know if I can be on a podcast with you anymore.
Oh no, I still use Vim primarily, but I'm not gonna lie, there's been some recent experimentation in my life. It's normal, it's natural, everyone does it.
Everyone does.
I've that's what my therapist told me. Um, and yeah, no, it's I like to use it for certain things. But yes, I'm still primarily
Just
a
messing with you, man.
Vimmer. But yeah, yeah, but I have a hard time with those. I have a hard time with coding standards because like, I don't want to do it enough to where it becomes normal.
Yeah.
Because I'll have stuff that I'm doing, I'll have open source stuff that I'm doing, and I'm gonna write the way that I write because I can do it fast and I don't have to think, and you know, um, it's just the way I work, and then I gotta come to work and be like, oh wait, shit, is this supposed to go on the top or bottom? Is this bracket go on the next line? Am I in PSR1 or am I in some weird voodoo world?
Yeah, I think you're probably in a voodoo world, definitely.
Yeah.
So something that, has helped me, like something that I've always, struggled with in code is, or in terms of practices, keeping things, portable or keeping things, um, environmentally agnostic, because it's very, very easy to make things that hey, works on my machine or works in my particular environment or whatever. But maybe you have the luxury that that's the only environment it needs to work in. But I've found that it's better to try to make things as portable as possible.
Yeah.
So something that's helped me with that significantly is the 12-factor app thing came out a while ago. And
Okay, I think I'd seen something about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't, you should check it out. It's like 12factor.net, I think, or .com, something like that. 12factor dot something.
I think I had a discussion about this with somebody maybe it was at True North.
Just Google it. You probably
Okay.
did. I think David was there talking about it. But
Yeah.
anyway, so the idea it has a lot of good. It's got a lot of goodies in there, like a lot of best practices in there. But it talks about things like running builds is important and essential, and then it talks about not having things that are tied to environment. So dealing with how do you configure the application and how do you allow it to work in other systems. So some of it applies to all projects, some of it doesn't. Some of it's more specific to I think the type of apps that guided the creation of this. But the idea is to keep things as portable as possible, so they're not it's not something that's tied to a specific file system or that type of
right
that
or
type of
path on a
binding.
file system, right?
Yeah, and so that has definitely helped me become a better programmer, to think about how do I how do I deal with my code? Like, how does my application as a whole like fit into its environment? Like, what type of resources am I requiring? And am I assuming that this certain path is going to exist? All these little things that
Right.
slowly add up in code. I always struggled with that because I was often working on sites that or apps that were I knew exactly where they were being deployed. We
Hmm.
controlled the environment. We controlled everything about it, and so there was no real reason that I needed to think about portability. But as a general rule, it's a good idea because that opens your options up significantly. So if right now you're working on a single server that you control, but tomorrow you need to scale crazily, which tomorrow's not going to happen, but at some point you need to scale this thing. It may not,
Crazily.
yeah, it may make sense to put it into some other platform as a service, something like that. And if you're tied to how your environment was set up before, you're not going to be able to do that without significant structural changes to things.
Right.
So coding it in an agnostic way from the beginning is a better practice than
Right.
tying it, I think. So that's something that I've struggled with over time and something that I still do. But 12-factor app, if you haven't heard of it or if you haven't checked it out, go through, read it, and kind of understand where it's coming from. I think it's a worthwhile investment of your time.
It's a strong endorsement.
Yeah, I give it my stamp of approval.
That's
I don't know.
that. No, that's kind of your stamp of approval.
Okay,
When I hear you say that, I'm like, he's serious.
dead serious about this.
He's
But yeah,
serious
I mean
about
this, and I think this kind of sets. I don't want to say sets people apart from the just the hobbyist to the professional. Like I don't really buy into a whole lot of all that, but I'm just saying like you can tell when someone has absorbed what is going on in the 12 factor app. Like you can tell by the code they've written
it. Yes,
and how they deal with that type of stuff. Like it's pretty obvious to me at least.
and those are people that you would, if you saw those skills, those would be people that you would like to hire and like to bring
Yeah.
in. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
these are the people that can transform your product from something that is beginning stages or this huge mess into something that's like, oh, this works. It actually I like how this works.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody's probably had some story or some issue with that, right? Like you write something and it works great. I actually just had one not that long ago. Like you think I'd have learned by now. No, it was actually it was a little bit different situation, right? Um, we had something we had to do. We didn't have a box. It was a really quick turnaround, and so I wrote all this code, and I had a Vagrant box. I had the same OS that we were going to use, and tried to get it configured, the way I needed it for everything to work. And then I used Composer, and there wasn't really a front end component, so I kept track of everything that I installed, and then they spun up an Amazon instance and threw it on there, and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
It just didn't work, and I kept track of everything. That's one of the problems I found with Vagrant is if something goes wrong, it's really hard to figure out what's what. Um, as far as that kind of stuff.
It can be. It
Um,
depends.
right. I've never had good luck with it, and I probably don't know it all that much. I should probably read Erica's book because I bought it and I don't think I've made it all the way through yet. Um, but yeah, I went through and sorry, Erica. Wrote all this code and I knocked this out in like 3.5 days, and it was supposed to take a week, and like it worked and it felt good, and then we ended up spending the whole weekend troubleshooting it on the server because the server wasn't set up the exact same way. I mean, some of the stuff you can prepare for, like you said, paths and locations on the file system. You can configure around, but some of it is just underlying OS level type stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's nuances. I'm not saying that if you follow the 12-factor app that you can write your code and it will work in any environment. Nobody cares, but it part of it.
Nobody
I think
cares.
part of the documentation in there, or part of what it's telling you is, as someone who's, they probably even call it like a 12-factor developer or whatever. But as someone who's subscribing to these concepts,
A 12-fee.
a 12-fee, you're probably going to, fight when you see something that's like, oh well, our production stack uses Apache and MySQL and something else, but locally I like to use Postgres and Nginx because it's better and that's what I have set up.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to resist that because you're just causing yourself grief by doing that.
Right.
Like you're making it a lot more likely that you're going to run into problems by doing that if you have that luxury. I mean, when I worked, I've worked places before where we were developing something that had to be deployed to, or was given to other people to run on their own systems. So it was like, we pretty much had to test it everything that we could possibly figure out because it's like you can't control what versions these people are running. Really,
Right.
I mean, you can tell them, the minimum we support is this, but
They're
you
going to
can't
try anyway.
control patch levels, and
Yeah.
there's all kinds of things that you run into. So, yeah, I mean, it's not going to protect you from all of that, but the ideas will help you to avoid that situation you're talking about, where you're like, okay, I got my special Snowflake app running in this specific environment. Let's
Right.
deploy it in one that's pretty close, and it
Voila.
fails miserably.
Right.
Hopefully, it helps you avoid that particular problem.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. It's a common problem, and it's not, there are things that you can do like the 12-factor app to make yourself more aware, but there are going to be times too where you just, unless you're the ops person, there's not much you're going to be able to do. You just got to work through it sometimes. Just like life.
Sometimes you do.
Yeah. It's a metaphor for life.
Yeah. So another best
Like you just
practice.
move on. You just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, we'll just move on from that. Another best practice that I think everyone should get going on at least is continuous integration and continuous delivery. Now I know that may be scary if you're, depending on your definition of continuous delivery, but the basics of it is that your code or your application, whatever you're merging in, should always be at a state where it could be deployed to production. Doesn't mean it has to be.
Right.
Doesn't mean that there has to be automation that deploys every time you merge or anything like that. It just means that you are always at a state where if it got deployed to production, it wouldn't be a problem. And I think that this is an important thing for, growing developers to understand is, you have to think about what you're doing and how it can survive in production at all times.
Mm-hmm.
So, don't, this whole concept of, I merged this thing and, but it's not ready yet. No one pushed release yet. Like that, I've worked places where it was like that. Like you merge something into master or trunk or whatever you have, depending on what you're using, and you're like, okay, I just merged this because I needed to get it out of a branch, but don't deploy this because it's a problem. That should never happen. If that's happening where you are, like if there's a green light or a red light somewhere that's saying, this can't go out or whatever, you need to fix that immediately because that's a problem. Like that's hindering you. So continuous integration, like knowing the status of things is important, and then continuous delivery, knowing that whatever is in your main line is production ready, it takes a lot of the pain out of development.
Right. So that leads me to my question because I've had conversations on this topic with people before, and one of the first questions I always ask them when they talk about continuous integration or continuous delivery is, what does your test situation look like? And
What does my personal test situation look like?
I hypothetical you, rhetorical
Oh, okay.
you,
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
the hypothetical rhetorical you, um, you.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, just making sure. I'm not talking to you.
Yeah. I mean, so the question is,
So yeah, so well, that's the first thing I asked myself. What's your test situation? What kind of coverage do you have? Do you have integration tests? Do you have things that can be run, in an automated manner? Because I have always put those things together, in a system like Jenkins or something, right? Where as part of that deployment, your tests are going to be run and checked out, and it's not going to go out if you worked the tests. But from kind of hearing you describe it, it kind of sounds like it doesn't have to be like that. Like for you, I kind of got like whatever you have to do to make it good. So like I guess maybe running the tests, but not as part of the deployment process. I can't think of a reason why you would want to do that. But what if I mean I guess what I'm asking is what kind of advice would you give for people whose testing game is not on point and they want to get into CI/CD?
um, well, I mean, if you're not writing tests, then uh, you know, continuous
Right.
integration isn't really going to have that much benefit to you. I
Right.
mean, I mean, yes, you can have it auto do things like check standards and stuff like that, but the real point of it is to know that what you pushed is functional,
Right. Which,
and
which would require tests.
the best way to do that is to have automated tests that run as part of the build, right? Like,
Right.
so you can know. I mean, yes, you'll catch other things like you know other random bugs, but if you don't have like file system type stuff, but if you don't have tests, I don't know what it is that
Right.
continuous integration is really buying you. So my advice is if you don't have tests, you should start there. You should write some tests.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the whole point of continuous integration is to inspire confidence and to inspire the idea that this is checked. Like I know that this passes the test that we wrote. So it's not perfect, right? Like you need to have code reviews in place because the code reviews are helping you by having someone who can say yes, the tests that need to be written were written, and then the continuous integration side says that of the tests that were written, they all actually pass. So you can write a whole bunch of passing tests that will pass CI just fine,
Right.
but don't actually test what you're supposed to be testing, or don't cover where you're supposed to, have covered. That's what the code reviews pick up.
Right.
Then the next step of that is continuous delivery, which is, after the tests pass, or the only way it should get merged in is if the build passes, and which would mean the tests have to pass. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of where continuous delivery lends itself to continuous deployment eventually, because you've already got this process in place that verifies that the tests that you're needing to have written were actually written. That's the code reviews. The continuous integration verifies that they passed. Then continuous delivery means that I know that once this is passed or once this works, and it has been merged in, that it passes again, and then that's where it says, okay, now that I've got all this code together in this one place, I know that it's gone through and been code reviewed and gone through multiple testing cycles through continuous integration, and
Mm-hmm.
now it's ready for deployment. So once it passes, we can push it out. You know, my advice is you should do all these things, right? Like, I mean, you
Right,
should
right.
be doing all of this. There's different levels, I think, that you could subscribe to, and I don't know that any one is better than the others, but I think it all kind of starts with tests. Like they're the foundational building block of this whole process.
Right. Yeah, and I always tell people if you have tests, like, yeah, you shouldn't be all that concerned about CI or CD at this point. And
If you don't have tests,
if you don't have tests,
okay,
if you have no tests or under 10% coverage, something that's not going to be able to reliably tell you that your stuff is working. Yeah, I mean, work like you said, work on getting that test coverage built up before you try to tackle CI/CD. I've had some. I mean, the biggest reason I tell people that is because I know that it's not really going to be helpful, and since I told them that it would work, they're going to come to me and ask me questions, and I don't want that. Because that's like, if you're going to do that, that's your deal. Don't drag me into it. But it's almost kind of a dangerous thing. I mean, if you're not running tests, as part of that build or deploy, like you could just be throwing a whole bunch of fatal errors out into production and not even, like, you just wouldn't know. I mean, when the phone started ringing,
well, yeah, I mean you know that. So, our good buddy Chuck, Chuck,
man, Chuck, what's up, buddy?
he asks a question.
Oh,
He says, how does user acceptance testing fit into this process, essentially? So, like, where does that fall? Because you obviously can't have manual testing for the user, or whoever's gonna do the acceptance testing, right? Like whether it's an actual customer, whatever, yeah. So that really, for me anyway, and for the stuff that we do, so that kind of falls outside of the pipeline that we use and I'm talking about my current job, but it kind of falls outside the pipeline in my opinion, because it's typically the process of developing into something that's ready for delivery or ready to be merged. You're going to have someone who's acting on behalf of the user. So this for me would usually be our product manager who's on the team. They'd be acting on behalf of the user, so they're kind of doing user acceptance during development, and then we also have kind of baked this into our development QA process and code review process. Is we write how to actually go about verifying something. So as we work on a particular story or task or whatever, we've got some criteria in there that tells us this is the acceptance criteria. And so we bake that into our entire process. So it says in the code review process, we've got a section that says these are the steps that you should follow, and if these pass, then it's met the acceptance criteria, essentially. And then outside of that, we have a QA team who does manual acceptance testing for us. And so they're kind of informed by the owner, the whoever is the product people, or whoever put the bug reports in, or the customer, whoever, like they're informed by them as to how to write and deal with the test. So they do it as a separate process. So that usually happens for us in production. So after we've gone through this whole pipeline, we've had several opportunities for people acting on behalf of the user persona, going through and verifying the functionality according to the acceptance criteria, and then it gets a secondary green light, I guess, once it's out. So for us, that's how it kind of fits in. Now, I don't know that there's a technically correct answer to that question, but that's how it works for us.
I think because we use it a little bit more directly in our deployment process, right? It's got to go through there before it goes really anywhere else.
Hmm.
Well, we do our internal stuff, and then it goes out, and before it gets anywhere near production, they come and they come back to us. I think um, one of the things I've noticed with like UAT type and things is like when they're done really well, and when there's a lot of other good practices like on the team, like there's tests and there's coding standards. Most of the things that and it sounds like that's what you guys have. If you're deploying it to production,
Hmm.
most of the issues that you're going to see are going to be from um, some misunderstanding or misinterpretation of a requirement. It's not going to be a missing semicolon. It's going
Right.
to be
Yeah.
it's going to be something like a typo or on a field like not in the code, but like on the front end, first name or whatever, screw something up or um, something like that. So it's going to be a lot easier to fix and deal with at that point if you've got all that other stuff up front. But if you don't, then the UAT testing becomes a little bit more involved, and you start to find things that maybe aren't, they're not requirement related. They're more like, oh, somebody didn't merge this right, or there's there's a syntax error in the code. Um, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important that it for user acceptance testing, like it's not you're not testing that you know the code works necessarily. Like you're testing that the whole solution does what it's intended to help with. So like it solves the problem that it's intended to solve. So I mean that's why we put it outside of the pipeline. Like, and that's not to say that it doesn't occur inside the pipeline, which I mean that would be a misnomer. Like we take everything that we work on and it's deployed to a production-like environment
Mm-hmm.
internally
Mm-hmm.
first, and then it does undergo user acceptance testing to some degree there, but it's not
Okay.
as thorough as what happens after the fact.
Yeah.
And at that point, from my perspective at least, what is being tested is not necessarily, oh, this is code bugs or this is like code problems. It's usually what's being found is this is a business to application translation problem. Like
Yes. Yes.
it's not solving a business need. So to me, those aren't really something that we should try to bake into our technical pipeline as much. We should catch it if we can earlier. It's obviously less expensive then, but
Right.
it's not necessarily something that we should fret about. We should put trust into our product managers and trust into uh, the work that we've done to take ideas and turn them into stories that we're working on. We should trust that process, and if
Uh-huh.
that's a problem, then we will work on it there as opposed to bringing in more user acceptance testing inside the pipeline. That's just my on the spot answer to it.
Yeah. I think to give Chuck like a TLDR answer, like it's different for everybody, but it's really kind of dependent on how you set it up. Like in Jeff's situation, if you're doing all that stuff up front and you don't have to worry about that stuff going to production, it can be tested reliably and pushed reliably, then it's not really part of your process at that point. But in situations where you have less tests and less confidence that what you push is going to be good, um, you're going to probably have to incorporate it more into the actual pushing to production process.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I can
Is
see
that
that.
fair to say?
I think so.
Okay. All right. So we got another one in here. We're trying to figure out what's.
If you had another question, it's, how would you recommend convincing a team that there's a better practice after another team has already persuaded them on something? So
Ooh.
maybe I think that someone someone's persuading them, hey, we should do this, and then you're like, well, or you learn later, hey, that's not really that great of an idea. Actually, this one is a better way to do this, or a better way to solve this particular problem. Um, I don't, I don't know that I have a good answer to that. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's, I think this is kind of the natural progression of things. Like we constantly learn, so I think it should be natural. And I think if you feel like that's a problem, like if you feel like you can't convince people to change, going forward, I realize that, it's there's nothing worse than process change or constant evolution of processes and practices, like saying, hey, oh, we're doing this now. Oh, wait, never mind. We changed our mind. We're now going to do this. Like, there's nothing
Right.
worse than that.
Right. Certainly.
But I think that if you if you're at a point where you've realized that something that you're doing is not helping
Mm-hmm.
or is not giving you the benefit that you thought, I think that finding the right forum to express that is the best approach. And say, not don't approach it from a standpoint of saying, I found a better way. Approach it from a standpoint of, you know, how is the current practice causing you pain or preventing you from
Right.
doing something, and then say, I think a good way for me to do that is, or a good way to solve that particular problem is this practice, or doing it this way. And I'm trying to think of an example of when I've done that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Um, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I
That's
don't know
good.
if there's really anything, I mean, I liked the one thing that I liked in theory about Agile, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, um, was the theoretical idea of a retrospective as a way of handling things like that, right? Where the
Yep.
conversation happens regularly,
That's the
right?
perfect forum for this, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And, I mean, unless you butcher Agile like everyone does, um, then no, I won't discourage you. I'm going to be encouraging right now. Um, yeah, I mean, it's a perfect place for that conversation to come up, and you can have that conversation on a sprint to or whatever, iteration to iteration, whatever goofy thing you call it. Um, you have that conversation going on regularly. So as things get bad, the things don't have to get horribly awful to the point where um, everyone's ready to just stab somebody or cut somebody,
Yeah.
right? You can nip that stuff in the bud and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, maybe it's something like TDD or something, like pair programming or something like that. You can say, hey, I tried to pair program with Johnny, and he smelled like broccoli, and it wasn't productive, and or it was too long of a time to spend around him smelling like broccoli. So as a team, you get together and you kind of say, okay, well, that's a horrible example, of course. Um,
I think I know why you don't like Agile. If if you spent your time talking about the smells of the office, I can see why retros didn't work out for you.
right, Matt won't shower. Um, no, but if it's I don't know, it gives you that weekly or biweekly or again whatever you do, sure it's fine. Um, opportunity to say, hey, if this was working with pair programming, this worked really well, but maybe we could instead of requiring everyone to do 2 hours a day, maybe let's cut it back into one until people get. It allows you to kind of tailor the processes that you're implementing and the best practices that you're implementing to your team instead of just saying. I think that's one of the biggest things that kills this stuff like instantly is somebody's going to go, all right, we're going to implement. Here's a good example. We're going to implement Agile. Yeah. Okay. And then someone reads, all like 9,000 pages of this book about Agile, and then they just go, okay, now this is what we're doing. I read it in the book, that's how it goes. Teams are a lot more, teams don't need that rigidity. They need to be able to find their kind of place and how they interact and, what modifications to the rigid lines need to happen so that the team communicates. So I've seen that happen a lot too, where it's like, we're going to pair program, you're going to do it for 2 hours a day, and and there's just like this is exactly what pair programming is, and you have to do it exactly this way, or heads are going to roll.
So you're saying that teams should be agile?
Yeah. I am actually saying that, and I do actually believe that, but not this. I have an Agile book in my library for some reason. I have not lit it on fire.
And yeah, I definitely agree that is the case, and I feel like we're probably steering somebody towards being the best practice hammer and coming in and saying,
yeah, don't do that.
We're going to write tests, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do all this, and I think this is a good idea. So we're going to, yeah, I mean,
writing tests would be the one thing I would say. Like, if you're going to be aggressive about anything, make it about writing tests. Like, if you have to pick something.
Yeah, that's definitely true, and I mean, there's flexibility there too. Like, I know, I've had experience introducing tests into teams where people, weren't writing tests at all and weren't even test believers. They were, as Chris calls them, they were test deniers, and you're like, oh, that's stupid. I don't need that. And I think it's, it was a compromise. Like, it was always a compromise. It was something that was saying, I recognize that testing is a good idea, but these people who are wrong, they don't recognize it right now. So how do I go about showing them? And the process is very iterative. It's, hey, let's get some tests in place at a very high level and show them, hey, this is working and this is helping us to be able to change something. And then slowly and surely that kind of infects the rest of things. So that you start with this idea of here's this very high level test, which is testing the functionality from a user standpoint, and then we've got a few tests down here at the lower level that are testing the code from or testing the application from a code perspective, and then even lower they're testing it here and they're separating things, and then eventually you get to the point where that person who was saying testing is stupid is now using the test to help him or her develop something. And then they say, oh, it's that light bulb moment. And it happens for different people at different times. Like some people, you can just explain to them how testing works and how it helps, and then they're good to go. Other people need to see a situation where testing helps. And I think this is, this is true of all practices, but this is where you get, I've heard people try to sell testing in talks in different ways, and one of the most common is, you're a developer at this place, and your teammates and you're always staying at work until 8 p.m. because you're sitting there, you've got these problems, you're trying to hack them out, and then you start writing tests for your code, and then at 5 o'clock you start going home, and everyone's looking at you like you're crazy. And you're like, well, I got all my stuff done and it works, and I haven't had bugs, and they're like, how are you not having the same problems that we're having? And you tell them, oh, it's because I write tests, and eventually they say, well, I'm going to try
us more. Tell us more.
Too. And I think that's like a very exaggerated example, but that is exactly how it happens. Like if you're at a point, or if you're doing something and you see a problem and you've proposed a solution but nobody listens, or whatever, and you have the ability to just do it anyway yourself, just start there.
Yeah.
And people will start to notice that, your code is coming in cleaner and more succinct and, easier to read and easier to understand, and you're faster at fixing bugs, and, just they'll see that change and they'll wonder why, and then that's your point to say, oh, you remember I was telling you that I was interested in testing? Well, I've started writing unit tests for things, and now that's
Yeah.
helped me by this, and
Right.
that's how you become. And then you write a book or something, and you start your own Twitter personality. Oh wait, no, that was just Chris, but
You could do
that's
that.
how you get there.
You could do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think on that point, I think that's absolutely right. I call that guerrilla evangelism, because you're kind of you're not ringing the doorbell in your Sunday best, talking about if you've you know uh, fully accepted TDD into your life. Um,
That's terrible.
why?
No, go ahead. Continue.
Okay. Right. It's a more subtle. It's a little bit more underhanded. It's a little bit more like, yeah, like guerrilla-y.
Yeah, with the U, not like the gorilla like Keith
Not like right. Not gorilla as in like
Keith Casey.
yeah, gorilla as in not Keith Casey. His favorite animal or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So that's what I call that, right? And I have noticed times where it's backfired. I've actually had, because that's what I did at one of my previous jobs. Like, I'm just gonna write tests, and screw y'all. I'm just gonna write them. Didn't actually say that, but so I started writing tests for stuff, for everything. Every time something would change, bam, test. Whether it was a Selenium test that I was running through the I was using PHP unit, Selenium, with WebDriver and all that, and running everything directly through Selenium. And I had tests to show stuff was working and all that kind of great stuff. And so we got to the end of one of our sprint iterations, and they're like, "Oh, we didn't get as many points done this time," because that's clearly, our velocity had suffered, and so they asked if anybody had done something different. I mentioned I started writing tests, and I was ordered to stop doing that.
Yeah. Not being productive, Matt.
Which was like, well, I know it works. They're like, well, just stop. We need all of your time to be focused on user stories. Well, let me rephrase that. We need all of your time to be spent on poorly written user stories.
Well, to be fair, who cares? Who cares if what you're writing works as long as you got more points?
As long as you moved it over into the next column.
That's the goal of the game here.
You could literally just do that. You just be like, yep, that's done. We got 49,000 points this iteration. Great job, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it becomes. Yeah, it becomes a. I won't use that colloquialism. Becomes a pissing match.
So you're saying that a best practice is to pay attention to your points and your velocity?
No.
Oh, no. Okay.
Honestly, if you could take anything out of this whole thing about best practices, like from my standpoint, it wouldn't be like to do or not do a specific thing. I wouldn't tell you like run out and start writing tests tomorrow, or you've got your test, start doing CDCI tomorrow. What I would tell you is make sure no matter what you do going forward that you get a good feeling for the team and how they're going to work with it and embrace it and adapt to it, and don't be the best practice hammer of Thor and they have to do everything a certain way. Let your team, like, if you even have the hammer of Thor, like if you're a manager and your team is figuring out a way to do things, like you're paying them to be technical, right? They're paying you to babysit and make sure everybody gets work done. But you're paying them to be technical. They deal with this stuff every single day, and even if they're new to testing or new to whatever, like their mind is in that space every day.
Yeah.
And as a manager, your mind is more like, hey, what meeting do I have to go to in an hour? And
yeah, that's wrong. As managers, we think, what meetings can we create for other people to go to?
Right. But you would have to go to, right? So something we haven't talked about 5 times. And so, my thing would be, if you've got a team of engineers, web developers, software engineers, whatever you call them, web devs for the more hip, let them figure it out. Like, you don't need to be there. You don't need to be the hammer and the rule book, and we have to make sure that everything is exactly, the way that it's written in this XP book or in this Agile tome. Let the people that you're paying to do all of the work and figure this stuff out do it. They know it better than you. You're a manager. You quit coding like 3 years ago. So just let them do it, and they don't need your help. They don't want it. And they only smile at you because you're their boss.
Is that how you really feel, man?
In that situation, I mean, if they smile at you like when you're getting coffee, that's different. But when you're like, no, this has to be Agile, and they're like, oh, it's because they know that you can fire them.
Fair enough. I mean, I can't argue with that. So I guess it can be a thing.
If you're a manager, don't start misinterpreting every smile that a coworker gives you.
They hate me.
If there's a beautiful sunset and you guys smile, enjoy it. Enjoy your sunset. Enjoy your coffee.
Well, they're smiling about the sunset, not about you as a manager.
Right. Well, right. But you're enjoying that smiling moment together. And,
yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Enjoy your scones.
Yeah, enjoy your scones. All right. Do you have any other best practice advice besides, references to mythology?
Wait, are we talking about practice?
Besides references to Allen Iverson.
Oh, no. I mean, I think to kind of sort of piggyback or springboard off what I just kind of said. Just be a team. Work with your team. Like, you should be able to be open enough with your manager as a team and be like, hey, we appreciate that you're interested in this, but you don't know what you're doing. There's a political way to say that. Don't repeat that. Work that out amongst the team. That can be a good team building exercise or an icebreaker or something.
Step back. The adults got this.
Yeah, stand back. Hey, go sit at the kid table. Don't ever say it to your boss, because I understand they don't like that. But no, be a team. Work on it as a team. Come up with the things that are, it's not about following something exactly the way that it's written. It's about doing things increasingly better every day and improving. And maybe if you're, I wouldn't suggest you set this as your goal, but if you get at some point to that ideal of like, hey, we're really kind of pretty close to the definition, and it was an iterative, continuous improvement type thing, then that's great. And if you never get to that, Agile pinnacle of perfection, but what you're doing works for your team and you guys get stuff done, then that's awesome too. Like, it doesn't make you less Agile or less, capital A Agile or whatever the kids are doing these days. It just makes you pragmatic and highlighting and focusing on the strengths and weaknesses of your team and strategically planning the ways that you can use those strengths and minimize the weaknesses to get things done super fast.
Super fast. I think it's good advice. I think
It's about time, right?
Yeah, it's about time you had something good to say in here. Only took 18 episodes.
Wow. You went there. I just meant tonight. You went there. Damn.
Just kidding, man. Just kidding. You've had some great advice.
And we talk about practice.
The other thing I would say is, don't go searching to implement best practices because you heard that they're a best practice. Like, look for best practices or look for practices that other people are doing when you see a problem or when you see something that's a recurring issue.
Mm-hmm.
So this boils down to a whole bunch of things, but maybe it's a good idea that my team practices continuous deployment, but maybe it's not a good idea that yours does. Like, is it a best practice or not? It depends, right? Like, so don't. Just because we're telling you right now that you should have tests, you should practice CD, and you should, just because we're saying that, I mean, you should have tests, but, don't think that you have to follow everything that you read about as being a best practice just because. And our summarizer is saying when it comes to best practices, don't go chasing waterfalls, which is...
you know what? I was laughing because I could have swore you were going to say that, and I was going to lose it. And then you said, don't go chasing best practice. You totally killed it. I was going to totally lose it.
Yeah. So,
So good job. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. So, don't just do things for the sake of doing them. Like, yes, a lot of things that you'll read about as being best practices are probably rooted in, experience, but just because it's good for, a certain team or a certain situation doesn't mean it's good for everything.
Right.
But as a general guideline, my advice is if you're looking for something to read about or to understand, the 12-Factor app is a great place to start. There's a lot of stuff in there that will help guide you on other practices that are good. So it's not it's not just about a lot of people associate it with deploying things to Heroku, which is probably where it started. But it's not just that. It's way beyond that. So if you're looking for something to give you some inspiration into things that might help you solve problems, look there. But don't go into it tomorrow saying we're going to 12-Factor app all the things. That's not going to work.
You're going to have a bad time.
You're going to have a bad time. It's very true. Okay, well, I don't think I have anything else. Do you have anything else that you would like to say? Any last words, Matt?
Last words? No.
No.
I'm speechless for once. without speech.
Okay, cool. So Matt's without speech. So I guess it's up to me to wrap this thing up. So that was episode 18 of the Lose the Couple podcast, talking about best practices. If you haven't yet done so, go check out Code Rabbi. Go check out wisdomworldtour.com. See what he's up to. Check him out. Follow him on Twitter. Tweet him things. Tell him we sent you if you want to. Whatever. Do whatever you want. Or don't. Whatever. Just it's a best practice to tweet at him though. I'm just throwing it out there.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. So episode 18, Lose the Couple podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Later.